I was at church, offering prayers and lighting candles for cleansing. As soon as I walk into the church, an old lady calls out to me, "Dear, what time is it?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'll tell her. I know what you're up to over there. This is an act of theft, of energy and of time." In general, the church is a place of power. That's why not only grandmothers who want to pray for their loved ones go there, witches and sorcerers who interact with the dark side of Christianity also go there. That's why those who work with energies don't necessarily have to leave the egregore. They perform various rituals like those to draw time, youth, or health. Never take berries, apples, or candies from strangers' hands in church. If someone asks you what time it is, answer them. If someone tries to start a conflict with you, try to keep your emotions in check. Because that's exactly how the witches who have sold themselves in the church feed off your energy. And never take any offerings at the entrance. There's a threshold there, which I myself picked up unknowingly when I was about 16 or 17.
Is it really possible to steal someone's time? Listen, magic is pretty interesting in this regard, guys. In general, all magic, is it is essentially a game with certain specific rules, with specifically invented rules. Well, it is not just that they are made up, they are actually quite formal and structured. In general, yes, you can siphon off energy, you really can. But magicians, they are still interesting people in the sense that they take this very seriously, truly and deeply seriously. Like for example, when you step outside, if, let us say in April, a specific ritual for going outside, a specific ritual for entering a church, a specific ritual for leaving a church, and so on. And you see, that's the thing. The more you start, sort of programming the universe with certain rituals, the more meaning the universe, actually, it begins to precisely adapt to you. This is a long-known esoteric principle of similarity. That is, yes, the law that attracts if. And if you, let's say, choose to live your life according to certain rules, including magical ones, then your life will be structured that way. So you'll constantly be challenged by this. Someone will always try to do something to you, and you'll be trying to establish strong protection. This is that kind of esoteric game. That is, in their reality, it works, it really works. The problem is, you can simply step out of it and play by completely different rules. Completely. So you just won't care at all about headscarves and all that. Every single one of those people, no matter what he called them, they will all simply bounce right off you without effect. You should know that in this series there is a famous saying, a very good one that fits this situation. It's impossible to curse a monk. It's not even really a saying, more like an observation. You can't curse a monk because he is constantly developing himself. Especially a Buddhist monk. He doesn't care at all about all these egregores or any kind of magical stories. He practices meditation. He reaches exceptionally high levels, very high levels indeed, yes. These levels themselves serve as a strong form of protection for him, so to speak. Because here's what's interesting. Any curses, any at all, this is a really interesting topic. We've studied it for many years. Any curses work on the principle of a loop and a hook. I had a student many years ago who came up with this kind of analogy, a really great one, in my opinion, the loop and the hook. To put it in another way, you can't hang a curtain on a rod without a hook. The curtain has some kind of loop, right? You actually need to hook it onto something. If there's no hook, no matter how many times you try to hang it, it'll just slip right off and won't stay at all. So that is precisely why, if you do not have any internal hooks, we have to ask, what is a curse, really? It is a complex energy informational structure, a certain kind of negative program that is sent directly to you, and then it begins to take hold. But it either attaches to you or it doesn't. If there's something for it to latch onto, it will attach. If there's nothing to latch onto, it will just bounce back to the person or simply fall away, and that's it. So, of course, you can implement various types of protective measures and take other similar precautions. But if you work a little differently, if you completely eliminate all of those internal hooks, in other words, if you work through your own personal issues, you work through your issues with a psychologist, you work on yourself using meditative practices, and you work on yourself in various other ways. Then you know your entire inner world perfectly, just perfectly. You know exactly which energies are yours and which are not. And even if you notice some, let's say not a very pleasant energy at all, or say you take off that scarf or do something else entirely, or respond to your grandmother in some way, you can even tell her the time, but, if you tell her the time outside of the magical egregore, you'll tell her the time, for example, purely in a social sense, without any deeper meaning attached to it. That is, you'll look at your watch and simply say the numbers that are there for her, yes, with a sincere desire to help her, but again, without entering the magical egregore at all. And on the contrary, being, In the Buddhist egregore, for example, yes, there will be no effect at all. There's no hook, so again, this is what's interesting about magic. See, this is what you could call everyday magic. Back in the day, the guys from this field, so to speak, they observed certain energetic interactions. They do exist, and this really does work. But then there are completely different ones, and they start building on that basis. They construct their entire worldview on this, but, you know, there's a kind of general logical culture. I've simply had magical lives. I remember a significant number of my magical lives quite well, so I'm telling you this, so to speak, as a former mage, something like that, yeah. But there are other methods, entirely distinct and different methods, that take you out of this kind of thinking, so-called magical thinking. They take you out of it completely, and you start vibrating on completely and utterly different frequencies. And then you don't even need any kind of protection. A lot of people write about this, different guys, and they write to me at the school, you know. So what kind of protection should you use? Amulets or something else? Or something else? No, you don't need any amulets at all. There are other methods. There are methods, for example, like connecting with your higher self. That is, you have your higher self and deep inner work on yourself, on all your blocks, all your beliefs. This is already much better than any amulet because it takes you out of this egregorial way of looking at the world. Yes, it liberates you from the idea that someone can do something bad to you. It frees you from the idea that, for example, there are enemies around who can attack you and so on and so forth. Yes, it completely takes you out of the situation, and you will find that you no longer have any enemies. There are no attacks on you, physically speaking. There just aren't any in your reality. This simply doesn't exist. Like, you know that it could happen, that they might try to do something. It's like, you know, it's just one of those things, like it might rain. Well, it might, or maybe it won't rain, but you still have your umbrella with you, right? An umbrella, open your umbrella and walk. It's kind of a strange comparison though. But the point is, you really start living by completely different rules, and the old ones stop working for you. That's the trick of the universe. You can actually program it. So guys, hear me out here. You can reprogram and configure your universe so that it actively responds to the beliefs you hold, and it will react accordingly. The universe is like a vast, complex supercomputer. By the way,
I actually have a few acquaintances who, it's like they're constantly in these Star Wars, I would say, with some kind of entities
of the world.
So basically, sometimes they're being attacked, sometimes they're defending themselves, sometimes they're doing some kind of rituals, or they're using some kind of salty water.
Most of them, if you take the time to look really deep, like really deep, they actually enjoy it. They get a very specific and certain sense of pleasure from it. You know, it's like these constant Star Wars battles. In the literal sense of the word, I just remember from my past life being a mage. Of course, there are also resentments, deep ones, ordinary ones, and so on. Basically, there are some psychological reasons that draw you in that direction, but overall, you just like it. You get this, you know, kind of massive adrenaline rush, like the enemy is constantly attacking and I'm about to get him from the right, from the left, and he's after me and I'm after him, and who is actually cooler? It's like a sport. So
the point is that you just need to make this phase shift and get out of it. And vibrations, is it like raising your vibrations, or is it some kind of shift?
It's more of a phase shift, usually raising your vibrations, yes, but it can just be a phase shift. A shift, like we already mentioned, for example, atheists. So you can shift toward atheism. I can't say that's necessarily higher in terms of vibrations, but it is a phase shift, yes. You've reprogrammed yourself, and basically you're like, I don't believe in anything at all. But you really need to fully reprogram yourself for that. It's not just like, I imagined what if there's nothing, while in the background the thought nags at you like, well, you know that everything actually exists. So again, accessing the higher self is one type of phase shift. You understand that everything exists, you're not turning to atheism, you know that everything is real, but you simply realize that high energies and vibrations, a shift in that direction, reprogram your reality. So that you are no longer, basically the dense astral world won't bother you. And
if a person already firmly believes that there is this elderly woman with a headscarf and she is physically attacking him, how can he believe that she doesn't exist? Or how exactly does that process work?
Here, you need to work with information about branches of reality. Keep in mind, there are many of them, many different branches of reality. The idea is that with your perception, you attract the branch of reality most harmonious for you. Meaning that yes, you can reprogram your reality. So you will no longer encounter such old women, and even if you do, they won't be able to cause you any harm. because you have that very phase shift. That is, yes, you kind of no longer play by those rules. By those laws, by those signs, by those principles, in this regard, books work well. So in general, regarding branches of reality, this is the multi-dimensional reality of the higher self. That's actually the name of the book. It's by Jane Roberts, and you can take it as an interesting read. It's a starting point in that direction, an entryway, well, and of course, Michael Newton, my favorite. Yes, Journey of Souls, Destiny of Souls. You could also, for example, take Lera Nekrasova, her book about the branches of Earth's reality. It's another option you can consider. She just writes a lot of interesting things there about branches of reality and also about Atlantis. Overall, she provides a very detailed explanation of how these branch shifts happen, how they diverge, how they converge, and so on. And of course, you should definitely watch our channel, where you will find a wealth of fascinating information. There have been many videos about branches of reality, a wide variety of different protections, and those very same complex phase shifts, and so on and so forth. There have already been a lot of videos here, so there you go. And as they say, you can come to my school to phase shift toward your higher self. In January, there will be a new discounted group. Right now, we are actively recruiting for it. It will be another big, very big group.
What does a person feel when they phase shift themselves?
There is more harmony in your life, more happiness, more relaxation, and no more enemies. You know, it's like, yeah, there are no enemies. Everyone around you is your teacher. If you rise to a higher level and look at the topic of enemies from there will be a gentle smile, a light, kind smile, as if to say, well, listen, what enemies? Everything is one, one is everything. Everything is a manifestation of God. Everything is a manifestation of the Absolute. Yes, and it's a certain game that the Absolute is playing. If you don't like it, you can change it. You can change the game and start playing something else. It's really something you experience as a mystical event. It's not just on the level of words. Right now, as I'm saying this, it might sound from the outside like, here we go again, some esoteric guy on the internet read too much and is spouting all sorts of nonsense again, like go get a real job at a factory and all that. No, I mean, it's actually a real mystical experience, a deep mystical experience, your own, which you live through regarding any question. Absolutely, starting from what you should have for breakfast and ending with some global topics.
No need to ask your higher self about breakfast.
You can. In fact, our very first practice of getting answers from the higher self is about the most basic questions, like the most elementary questions to the higher self, such as what to eat for breakfast. And you do get answers there. They just come forward, you know, usually with a bit of light humor, but they're very direct.
Higher selves have humor.
When you connect with the higher self, you receive a certain informational package from there, then you decode it with your mind. And more often than not, this package is imbued and energized with a very specific type of energy. Some of these energies can be interpreted as humor. It's not exactly direct. It's not quite like our earthly humor here. It's more like a certain spectrum of energies that the mind can interpret as humor. Something like that. It's hard to describe because, actually, the answers to questions from the higher self come in several forms. The most accurate ones, what are we doing after all? We are following the path of complete disidentification, reaching a certain state. In this state, you begin to formulate specific requests and receive certain responses, certain answers. These responses come precisely as states, not as images or words or a voice. Thank God, no. It is exactly a certain state. That's what I call it. An informational package. And then you try to process this informational package with your mind, which is what the mind is actually made for. In fact, it's meant to interpret this multidimensionality and translate it into the current dimension. You start to interpret it with your mind, trying to unfold what exactly has come to you. And sometimes there's even a sense of humor in it. Well, it gets interpreted directly into our earthly waves and vibrations as humor.
But how do the higher beings see us at all? How do they see us? If you look at it from their perspective, so to speak, do they see us physically? Do they understand that we're sitting on chairs right now, that we're talking?
Yes, but the only thing is, look, again, this is very important. There is no higher self that is separate from us. So as we're talking right now, the higher self sees us, the higher self is us. Until the age of 5 or 6, we were that very higher self. Until these social layers started to form in us, as I mentioned in detail in the second month of my course, right? What happens is that at the age of 5 or 6, during those first 5 or 6 years, you come here as a pure spirit. Why does everyone love children so much? Because they are so bright. They radiate this original light. In the 5th or 6th year, these social layers begin to form. They start to cover you, so to speak, from above, and gradually a personality is formed. But in reality, this personality is illusory, not the higher self. In other words, we are not the personality, but we are the higher self. So here it's actually more accurate, perhaps, to talk about how the personality sees us, our true essence, rather than how, and the higher self sees our true essence, because the higher self is our true essence. That's the first thing. I always make it a priority to emphasize this specific point, so that everything is perfectly and immediately clear to everyone. And from the perspective of the higher self, again, it really depends on exactly how deep we choose to go. If we go to a very high level, then absolutely everything you find there is pure energy. That is, if you go really, really high, there will be a sense of total energy in everything. So like the energy body is energy, the chair is energy, the shoes are energy. There won't really be much distinction between a chair or shoes. The higher you go, the more you feel this. Everything is one, one is everything. Eternity ahead, eternity behind. Everything is the creator, everything is God, everything is... This is just like all those stories from ancient Chinese books and scriptures. In yoga, they say that everything is one is everything, the absolute dissolved in every particle. There, you really feel and experience this as something mystical. We also go over this in the 5th month, specifically at the practical level. And if you look at it from a more down-to-earth perspective, well, yes, there will be a sense that I am a spirit in a body. I am sitting here in this material world, in this body, on this chair. The chair is also material, the shoes are material, the jeans are material. I am sitting here, I am talking about something. So this is a dense world, a cool, dense world. That's roughly how it will be, like how fun it is here, how interesting God manifests himself in every object, how fascinating it is, how he becomes denser here. Something like that in that spirit.
From the mind's point of view, for some reason, we don't think like that.
Well, that's because it's the personality. It starts to come over you right around age 5, 6, 7, or 8. It begins to take hold of you and you become a bit separated from the spirit. Disconnected from your higher self and the cosmos or the absolute, you start to live purely through these social roles and the norms that exist here.
And our main task is actually to return back.
Well, not always. In fact, everyone has their own mission. Some people come here with a very specific mission. For example, I don't know, to work through relationships with the opposite sex. They don't really have much of a... They don't have a mission to return to the higher self. They came here with certain goals, but returning to the higher self helps you achieve them faster than anyone else. You'll become clearer on them because you are at the higher self. The higher self made these decisions. Where to come, into which family, with what goals? Yes, that's the first thing. Second, you are less susceptible to egregorial influences from the surrounding world, to various social influences. You see things more clearly, the world in which you live, and the goals with which you came here, regardless of what those goals are. So I'll explain it to you in this way. Returning to your true self is not the primary goal for most people, but returning to your true self allows you to much better fulfill the goals with which you originally came here.
You said that when we rise higher, to higher levels, from the mind's perspective, it seems like we have to soar somewhere, as if it's to the heavens, to the stars, or somewhere else. It's not about soaring.
I often use either to rise or to go deeper. Because of this, people often come back and ask me once again, how can you possibly equate going deeper with rising up? They say that going deeper is like going down and rising up is like going up, but you say whether it's up or down. How do you understand which is right, up or down? Which way should you move? The problem is that when you reach the higher level, you have that very phase shift we're talking about now, which happens specifically in terms of frequencies. In other words, your frequencies shift in phase to higher frequencies, and you free yourself from the pressure of the masses, from the pressure of social norms and social constructs. So it's not so much a shift directly upward or somewhere else. Rather, it's more about the profound process of purifying your internal spiritual space from all sorts of egregorial layers that surround you. These layers exert a heavy pressure upon your conscious mind and continuously influence and shape your entire personal worldview. And this process simultaneously resembles both a deepening into yourself and a raising of frequencies, an ascent upwards. So on one hand, it can be perceived as a deepening, and on the other hand, it can be seen as a majestic and steady rising toward a higher state of being. But in principle, these are all mental constructs, which ideally you also need to disidentify from. I'm just saying them so that I have something to say, so that the mind has at least something to grasp onto. So it's clear what I'm talking about. But in reality, you disidentify from all mental constructs, including the idea of deepening or rising upward. And only after that does your true essence actually begin to reveal itself.
Thank you. And friends, right now I'm taking Danila's course. I'm in his training program, and I recommend everyone to join the new group. When does it start? In January, right? In
Yes, the discounted group is in January.
Thank you.
My dear friends, for 10 years now, I've been teaching a course on the higher self for a Russian-speaking audience. During this time, about 4,000 to 4,500 people have passed through my school. I've been working on this topic for 20 years. Today, my school is one of the largest and most famous specialized schools for connecting with the higher self in the Russian-speaking world. And then I suddenly realized that it is finally time to reach out to the masses, so to speak. Yes, to the much wider world and to the incredibly vast expanse of the entire global internet. All the professional skills I have carefully developed, all the dedicated practices I have refined, and all the quick entries, thorough checks, and rigorous exams I have built over the last 10 years are now being brought to a truly global level. I now invite you to join a brand new, specially discounted group for the comprehensive Return to the True Self course, now available in English for students everywhere. 6 months of work on stopping the internal dialogue, working with blocks, and focusing on actually accessing the higher self. Answering both simple and complex questions regarding purpose, contact with God, and with the planet. Answering basically any questions on any topic, including work, relationships, and anything at all. Manifesting desires through the higher self, viewing past lives through the higher self, and everything that didn't fit into the first 5 months in a separate 6th one. And after that, you'll have the opportunity to join the alumni club, as well as the chance to continue your studies at the second level of the school. The price for the discounted groups is discounted. You can find all the information about this below at the link under this video.